It's been a while. Too long. But I recognized the house as soon as I saw the front of the house. What to speak of the backyard. Manasi Ganga, you look really happy. Well, there's lots of other things. People. We had a situation during this Memorial Day weekend where it was different but similar. And PowerPoint projection on a screen where there's so much sunlight doesn't really work so well. So we just have to kind of fake it or something because the visuals make a big difference. I don't know if that will help. Somebody that's more technology smart than me can decide. I think we'll just wing it because it might be more commotion than it's worth it. You just pretend that you can see some nice images on the screen and we'll just move forward. I think I should, while we're fiddling around and waiting for the technology to switch to what's on my screen that's over here. My understanding is this is a pre-wedding party or something like that. Get together, you know, because of restrictions in how many people can come and so forth. Oh my gosh. I don't think you should try. We'll just pretend that it's kind of nice. Anyway, you probably know as much about this as I do. It was on and it was off and it was on and it was off and it was on and it's off and it's on. And I will have to be present through a little recording instead of in person, but such is life. At least it's moving forward. During this visit, it's going to be concluded tomorrow evening with, many of you know, I'm stalling for time till he gets the image on the screen. One of the efforts here in Naperville has been encouraging people to receive Srimad Bhagavatam in their home and encouraging people to read Srimad Bhagavatam together in reading groups. And it's not only happening here, it's happening in many places. And it's really interesting, quite amazing how people that really don't know too much about Krishna consciousness, they really like it, and it makes them connected to Krishna consciousness. It's a very nice program. So some of the groups here, as far as I can understand, some are in Canto 2, some are in Canto 3, some are in Canto 4, meaning they've been going at it for quite some time. And so this has been kind of like an overview, or it's being called a flow of the subject matter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And we're all the way up to flow number 11. It's the beginning part of Canto 5. Something's wrong. Okay. I mean, the color images you won't be able to see so well, like this one. But that's okay. So Canto 5 comes right after Canto 4. And Canto 4 ends with King Pachini Bari going back to Godhead. Who's King Pachini Bari? King Pachini Bari is, so starting with Canto 3 and continuing through Canto 4 is the first of the 14 Manu, Swayambhuva Manu, and the lineages of kings that come from Swayambhuva Manu. I mean, before that, it's creation and subcreation, and once the creation is there, Brahma, having completed the creation, it's a very interesting description. 2 cantos dedicated to that topic. He has to fill up the universe. So one of the ways is he has Manu appear directly from his body, and his wife appear directly from his body at the same time, and they're in their fully adult forms. It was pretty good mystic power. And they come before him and request some service. He says, help me fill up the universe that I just built and create good praja. And he also gives them the assignment of creating laws for mankind. So we hear they have 2 sons. This is important because it's how chapter 5 begins, or Canto 5 begins. So we're in Canto 3 now, and there's 2 sons. The elder son is Priyavrata. The younger son is Uttanapada. And there's 3 daughters. So the main daughter that's spoken about is Devahuti, and there's that whole description, 6, 7, 8 chapters of Devahuti and Kardamuni and their marriage, and they do austerities and so forth and so on. And Kapila Dev gives his instructions in Sankhya philosophy to Devahuti. It's a long section. But that's the elder of the 3 daughters. But the elder of the 2 sons, normally, this is right out of the gate. As soon as Swayambhuva Manu has his first 2 sons, the elder son requests his father, I'd rather not become king. My younger brother, he's very qualified. Let me go to the forest and strive to perfect my spiritual life. So Swayambhuva Manu consents, and Priyavrata goes off to the forest. And we don't hear about him until 5th canto. We hear about him in the 5th canto because Swayambhuva Manu has a problem. Because the lineage of kings from Uttanapada just got interrupted. Because the sons of Prachini Bari, who was in that line, they achieved spiritual perfection. And then Prachini Bari, he followed their path, and so the lineage of kings was broken. And Swayambhuva Manu had a problem. You got to have a king, an emperor of the world. So what did Swayambhuva Manu do? This is what he did. He went to the place. He went to the place where there were no motorcycles. He went to the forest, up in the mountains, where Priyavrata was doing his devotional practices, and he explained his problem. And I need somebody to rule the universe, or rule the planet Earth, excuse me. And Priyavrata didn't say no, but he didn't say yes either. He, from much earlier in his life, he had no interest in those things. He had interest in only these renounced activities. That suited his nature. And so, in a timely manner, Narada Muni, who has all along been the spiritual master of everybody else in this line, he just parachutes in with his veena, and Priyavrata is expecting, now I've got some sannyas support here, and he'll say, go ahead and say no to your father. He didn't say no. But he was, they had some nice discussions. These are 2 of the 12 Mahajans, and now descending, because there's a real critical situation, a 3rd of the 12 Manus, Lord Brahma. That's who you see up there on the left, coming on his swan carrier. Down here in the lower left, you can't see him so well, but that's Swayambhuva Manu. And there's Narada with his veena. And Priyavrata says, here's my reservation. If I become the king, then I'm going to have a queen. And if I have to have a queen, I'm going to get attached, and I don't want to get attached. So, what to do? And Brahma said, no problem. I gave you the benediction. That you'll become attached, but you won't stay attached. You'll become detached again. Is my word. So he had confidence in the word of Brahma, and confirmed by Swayambhuva Manu and Narada Muni. And so he finally said yes. And he entered into the out of the forest and back to the kingdom. And he ruled for a long time. He became married and had sons and so forth. So that's where this section begins. There's Maharaj Parikshit kneeling before Shukadeva Goswami and the assembly there. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Maharaj Parikshit is asking, why did King Priyavrata, who was a great self-realized devotee of the Lord, remain in household life? How is it possible for a person like King Priyavrata, who was so attached to wife, children, and home, achieve the topmost infallible perfection of Krishna consciousness? That's the starting point of chapter 1. So we're going to hear about Priyavrata some more. While he was king, he did something very interesting. He was the ruler not just of this earth planet, he was the ruler of the universe. He was very powerful. And he was not satisfied that there was day and night in the universe. So he knew what to do about it. He got a really fantastic chariot and rode the chariot. Now this gets into the later parts of the 5th canto where it's Vedic cosmology, but the ground of Vedic cosmology is set in just chapter 1. His chariot moved the sun moves in a clockwise direction. It's a long story. I mean, explaining Vedic cosmology is complicated. But the sun moves in that clockwise direction while the chariot is moving in a counterclockwise direction. But the wheel of time, Kalachakra, moves faster than his chariot. Anyway, so what Priyavrata did, that he had a chariot that was really as bright as the sun, and he was 180 degrees opposite the movement of the sun, and he moved so that it was sunlight all the time in the universe. He was a powerful personality. And as he moved, he would have had a really big chariot too, because the chariot made depressions or ruts, or the wheels were heavy and large, and it made big tracks in the plane of Bhumandala. The result was there are 7 islands and 7 oceans that are circular, created by the wheels of Priyavrata's chariot. Pretty fantastic, right? I mean, it's a really big chariot. And it's such that as he moved, the wheel span of the chariot got larger. And so it wasn't just one circular motion and the ruts got bigger and bigger. The span of the axle of his chariot got bigger, and so larger circles and larger circles and larger circles, until there were 7. A ring of 7 islands and 7 oceans in between those 7 islands, circular islands, which make up the topography of this plane of Bhumandala. And the seasons also got balanced. Wasn't like Chicago or Naperville. It was, even seasons during the reign of Priyavrata. Here's a painting that shows what he did. Well, you can see there's really bright. That's his bright chariot, as bright as the sun, following 100 degrees opposite the movement of the sun, creating light in the whole universe all the time. Have any of you been in the northern parts of Canada or Alaska, where it's in the summertime, it's daylight all day long? It's really far out. It doesn't turn dark. And in the wintertime, I've been there in the wintertime, but the daylight is, it's almost like night all day long. Not so pleasant in the winter. Anyway, that's what Priyavrata did. And that's described in chapter 1. We're going to go through chapter 15. So, chapter 2, Priyavrata renounces his kingdom. His son, Agni-dhara, became the king. And when Agni-dhara became a king, he performed austerities to please Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma was pleased, and he arranged for a qualified wife who was really beautiful. She was a heavenly damsel, named Purvachiti. And from the combination of Agnidhara and Purvachiti came one son named Nabhi. He's a very important person in the fifth canto because Nabhi later became the father of an incarnation of the Supreme Lord Rishabdev. So while Nabhi was performing a sacrifice, Nabhi is over here on our left. It's really a nice painting, but you can't see it so well. So Nabhi is over here on the left with his arms raised because he was doing a yajna, and Lord Vishnu was so pleased by his yajna that he personally came. And Nabhi offered his prayers. Lord Vishnu offered his blessings, saying, I know your desire. You wish to have me as your son or a son like me, so I will appear as your son. And that's who Rishabdev was. That was a really quick chapter 3. Chapter 4, Rishabdev, when he grew, became a very celebrated personality and loved by the citizens, and so very happily Nabhi installed him as the king. So we're just went through chapter 4. And chapter 5, Rishabdev had 100 sons. We all know this. I mean, most of us know this. 100 sons. That the eldest of Rishabdev's sons was Bharat. And here's a painting that you can't see so well, but over here on the right, there's Bharat, and over here are his sons, and they, of the 100 sons, 9 of those sons became the Navayogendras. Now, Navayogendras, we don't hear too much about them until the 11th canto. This is the 5th canto. But they're super qualified. They have, they're not part of any varna or ashram. They're beyond the varnas and ashrams. Like Narada Muni, they can travel anywhere. They don't even have a vina. They just travel anywhere. And they give transcendental knowledge. That's what 9 of his sons did. Then some other of his sons, they became Kshatriyas, and they ruled the earth under Bharat Maharaj. And the rest became Brahmanas. So there's a really nice example from the Bhagavatam that one father may not have, the sons may not be of the same group as their father. Beyond the Varnashram system, some Kshatriyas and some Brahmanas, one father. So he gave instructions to his 100 sons before he left the kingdom and turned the kingdom over to Bharat. And it's a very celebrated section, Rishabdev's teachings. It's good for everybody. When I first started visiting in Vrindavan on a regular basis, there was a Gurukula there at the time. And every morning, right after Mangal Arati, just before their classes, we would begin. I remember this very clearly. They had all the Gurukul kids lined up and screaming at the top of their lungs. They would recite the prayers or the teachings of Rishabdev to his sons. Very celebrated section of the Bhagavatam. It's verses well worth memorizing and repeating, and because it's instruction for everybody. Human form of life is meant for spiritual happiness. Spiritual happiness is not achieved by living like an animal, but by living through divine austerities, by serving Mahatmas, accepting of Guru, diminishing the activities of sense gratification, and always engaged in devotional service. So, summary of his teachings. And that's chapter 5. And now here comes chapter 6. There's Rishabdev, a very old painting, where after he installed Bharata as the king, he stayed around for some time, but his life gradually moved in the direction of living like an avaduta, and eventually he left the palace and lived like an avaduta. Like avaduta means he was not at all observing social convention, although he had previously been the king, ensuring that others would observe social convention and their varnashram duties. And little children, they didn't understand who he was, and they would taunt him and throw things at him and call him names and stuff like that, and he paid no attention. He didn't respond at all. There's a painting that I couldn't find. I spent a half an hour looking. If anybody knows where it is, send me a copy. It's a painting of Rishabdev lying on the ground like a python, meaning he didn't even walk around. If something came to him to eat, he would accept it, and otherwise he was just lying on the ground like a python. Eventually, in a certain mountain range, there was a big fire, and his body was consumed in a fire, and that's how Rishabdev left. Then comes the main topic, which we'll spend some more time discussing. That's chapters 7 through 15. Look at this. We've already covered 6 chapters. We're doing pretty good. So this is one of the VIHE teachers made these drawings as far as a summary of the chapters of each section of the Bhagavatam. Narayani. Little story. Once upon a time, I was a new devotee, and it was in the Boston temple, summer of 1970. And 1 month after I joined the temple in Boston, Narayani and her husband, they were married at the time, and lived together, even in the temple. They joined the temple. Purna Pragya. Maybe some of you have read some of his writings. So she's, a very learned person. Is taught in VIG for umpteen years. And so this is her work explaining the chapters of the whole of the 12 cantos of the Bhagavatam. So over there, around 9 o'clock-ish, that's chapter 7, where Bharat becomes the king. And he rules, and it's a little bit over there. Chapter 8 is he gets attached to the deer, and number 9 is some person's thinking he's mad, and so they want to make a human sacrifice to the goddess Kali. We'll see these images, but it's just a nice way of illustrating. So the focus on this section is Bharat Maharaj, the king, the deer, and the Brahmana. Some of you may have seen the drama. Gosh, senior moment, I can't remember the name of Bhakti Marg Swami. Thank you. Super Soul. Bhakti Marg Swami made a very nice drama, The Three Lives of Bharat. Did he perform it here? He did it on tour with youth as the actors during Rath Yatra time. Anyway, it's really nice drama. The Three Lives of Bharat. So that's what this is. And first is chapter 7. He becomes a king. Being ordered by his father Rishabdev, Bharat Maharaj married Pancha Jani, the daughter of Vishwarup. After this, he ruled the world peacefully. He's got a pretty fancy mustache, too. Formerly, this planet was known as Anjanabha. Nabha. Now, I'm accustomed to hearing Prabhupada in lectures say Elavrati Varsha. Elavrati Varsha. But after Bharat, it became Bharata Varsha. Bharata Varsha means this earth planet. Although previously, Priyavrata was ruling the universe. So somehow it got to be just this earth planet. And after the reign of Bharat Maharaj, he became Bharat Varsha. Bharat Maharaj begot 5 sons of the womb of his wife, the queen, Pancha Jani, and he gives the names. Now here's something that came from the devotees in China that are also reading Bhagavatam, by the way, along with our Bhagavatam reading groups here in Naperville. And it says there that he ruled the earth for so many thousand, I forget the number, 10,000, 100,000, 100,000, more than 100,000. Some really long number, 10 million years, something like that. So like, how's that possible? So I asked my scholarly friends, how's that possible? And they said, no problem. No problem because there are persons that exceed the norms. Meaning, this is Satya Yuga, and the norm is 100,000. Like maximum's 100,000 years. So his rule was for like much more than 100,000 years. That's a long time to do anything. And he was in the topmost stage of bhakti. So anyway, he ruled for so many thousand years. And when he was finished ruling, he turned the kingdom over to his sons, and they ruled. Because he performed various yagyas to satisfy the Supreme Lord, he was personally very satisfied. Being undisturbed in mind, he increased his devotional activities unto Lord Vasudeva. And after finishing his kingly duties, he divided his kingdom among his 5 sons. He left home and went to the place of Pulaha Ashram, named Pulaha Ashram. It's a celebrated place for sages to go to do austerities. Thus, he increased his devotion toward Vasudeva, and he automatically began to realize further his transcendental blissful life. The painting, you can kind of see it. He's down here with his arms upraised like this, and above him up there, that's a four-armed form of Vishnu. And it's a detail that's worth drilling down on a little bit. He was chanting Gayatri Mantra. Specifically, it says, he was worshipping, Prabhupada explains this, he was worshipping not the sun, but Narayana, because the presiding deity of the sun, the personality that presides, is Surya, but Surya is worshipping Surya Narayan or Narayan. That was what that illustration shows, and Prabhupada explains it in his commentary. So those of you that chant Gayatri or one day will chant Gayatri, the Gayatri mantra, different people have different ideas. Even Prabhupada sometimes says it's worship of the sun, because when the sun rises, that's when you begin. When the sun sets, that's when you chant the third time, and the juncture midday. So some people take it as worship of the sun. Impersonalists take it as worship of the impersonal, Brahman. Ask them. That's what they say. But Bharat Maharaj was a Vaishnav, and he was worshipping Narayan through Gayatri mantra. And he was really absorbed. Due to his highly advanced spiritual position, there were sometimes visible in his body the Ashta Sattvika transformations, such as ecstatic crying and bodily trembling, which are symptoms of love of God. Which brings another question. So it's said specifically, you probably know this question. He achieved the stage of bhava. How is it possible for one who achieves the stage of bhava to fall? You've heard that question before? No? Yes. You've heard that question before? So here's the answer. Jiva Goswami has a nice answer. His fall was not because of sin, because when the process of bhakti is such that it eradicates sin, and he was at the stage of bhava bhakti, so it wasn't the result of sin. Nor was it the result of his karma, because his karma was dissolved. So what was it a result of? He explains it was the result of anartha in the heart that had arisen because of some prior offense that hadn't been eradicated, even in the bhava stage. Jiva Goswami, in this section of his Bhakti Sandarbha, is explaining how dangerous and stubborn, pernicious, is the consequence of offense. It brings rise to anarthas, and anarthas bring rise to difficulty. So because of that previous anartha in his heart, he said that the deer appeared, and his choice to neglect his devotional practice and instead absorb himself in the deer was a conscious choice, arising from the anartha in his heart. The block of anarthas have the power to block bhakti. We'll say it again. The power of anarthas is so great, it has the power to block the power of bhakti. Like the clouds in the sky have the power to block the light and the heat of the sun. Above the clouds, the light and heat of the sun is doing just fine. But from our experience of the light and heat of the sun can be very different. We may not experience its fullness. Anarthas have a similar power to block the power of bhakti, our experience of bhakti, even at the stage of bhava bhakti. So what Jiva Goswami is explaining is basically watch out for offense, because it leads to anarthas. And anarthas have the power to block the power of bhakti. Even if you're Bharat Maharaj and having ashtaka, sattvika, bhava transformations of your body. What to speak of little old us. So one should be very careful. So he reached a very, very high stage. Now this is now a looking back summary or review. After ruling for thousands of years, Bharat renounces and retires to Pulaha ashram. There he performs austerity and gains complete satisfaction in devotional service by chanting the hymns given in the Rig Veda, that's Gayatri. He worships Lord Narayana, who resides within the sun and whose body is composed of golden effulgence. Those of you that know the Brahma Gayatri, It's Narayan and the effulgence from Narayana. So, that's chapter 7. Then, one day, a pregnant deer came to the side of the river to drink water. Now he took his bath in the river and sat by the side of the river to chant his mantras. And he saw on the opposite bank a pregnant deer, and she's looking around and drinking and looking around, and all of a sudden there was a really loud roar of a lion, and she jumped, and as she jumped, the pregnant deer gave birth to a little fawn, and the water of the river carried the mother deer downstream, and she drowned, and leaving this little fawn. And the king saw all this. So what do you do when you see something like that? You try to give protection. That's what kings do anyway. So out of compassion, Bharata brought the newborn fawn to his ashram and began to maintain the deer as his own child. He understood, I'm mommy and daddy in one, taking care of the deer, which is fine. It's across the top it says misplaced compassion, but it was just excessive. It wasn't wrong that he rescued the deer with the fawn, but he became so absorbed that he started neglecting his spiritual practice. Even when he was doing his spiritual practice, it was inattentive because of his attachment to the deer. Due to attachment, affection, and attraction for the deer, he gradually became distracted in his spiritual practices and completely neglected his sadhana. Then one day, the deer wasn't around. Oh dear. Where did she go? And in tears of lamentation, he started speaking like a madman. One day, the deer left Bharata's ashram, wandering in the forest, and he was worried. In lamentation and separation. Oh, I'm so negligent, like a cunning hunter. Alas, shall I see the deer again? Nice painting. When I placed all the sacrificial ingredients on the kusha grass, the deer, when playing, which touched the grass with its teeth and thus pollute it, when I chastised the deer by pushing it away, it would immediately become fearful and sit down motionless, exactly like the son of a saintly person. Thus it would stop its play. He looked at the moon, and he says, he sees some marks on the moon, and said, there's the deer up on the moon. He's like deer conscious. Remembering the time spent with it, because they had natural bond of affection for one another, so much so that he just neglected his sadhana. Oh, unfortunate Bharata, your austerities and penances are very insignificant compared to the penance and austerity undergone by this earth planet. Due to the earth's severe penances, the footprints of this deer, which are small, beautiful, most auspicious and soft, imprinted on the surface of this fortunate planet, the series of footprints shown a person like me who am bereaved due to loss of the deer, how the animal has passed through the forest, and how I can regain my lost wealth. Kind of like the gopis looking for Krishna. Only it's the king looking for the deer. By these footprints, this land has become a proper place for Brahmanas who desire heavenly planets or liberation to execute sacrifices to the demigods. So he got up and started searching. And as he was searching, he reached the edge of a cliff and fell off the cliff and crashed, thinking of the deer. That wasn't a good arrangement. Bharat died absorbed in thoughts of the deer and consequently attained a deer body in his next life. There's the moon. There's his thought of the deer. And there's Bharata landing at the bottom of the jagged rocks. At the time of death, the king saw the deer was sitting by his side, exactly like his own son, and was lamenting his death. Actually, the mind of the king was absorbed in the body of the deer, and consequently, like those bereft of Krishna consciousness, he left the world, the deer, and his material body, and acquired the body of a deer. However, there was one advantage. He did not forget the incidents of his past life. So because Super Soul was very kind in his efforts to reach Krishna, Super Soul gave him remembrance in the body of a deer of his previous life. So he became a deer. We're still in chapter 9. Although in the body of a deer, Bharat Maharaj, due to his rigid devotional service in his past life, could understand the cause of his birth in that body. Considering his past and present life, he constantly repented his activities, speaking the following way. In case you can't see, that's a deer in the middle of the screen. So he has repentance for his mistakes. In the body of a deer, Bharat Maharaj began to lament, "What misfortune! I have fallen from the path of self-realized. I gave up my real son's wife and home to advance in spiritual life, and I took shelter in a solitary place in the forest. I became self-controlled and self-realized, and I engaged constantly in devotional service, hearing, thinking, chanting, worshiping, and remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva." He was way up there. "I was successful in my attempt, so much that my mind was always absorbed in devotional service. However, due to my personal foolishness, my mind again became attached, this time to a deer. Now I have obtained the body of a deer and have fallen from my devotional practices." Although Bharat Maharaj received the body of a deer, by constant repentance, he became completely detached from all material things. He did not disclose these things to anyone. Of course, he's in the body of a deer. What could he do? But he left his mother deer in a place known as Kalanjara mountain, where he was born. He again went to the forest of Shaligram and the ashram of Pulasya and Pulaha. He went back to the same place where there were sages, and he just kind of hung out with the sages, sadhu sangha, listening, taking the remnants of their prasadam, wagging his little tail, and waiting for death to come, because he really couldn't do much in that situation. So looking backwards, here's a summary. Bharata showed compassion to a helpless deer calf. He became attracted to this animal and distracted from spiritual practices. Not just distracted, he made it specific. He made a conscious choice. Sheltering the deer, he became bound to it with affection. Thus, at the time of death, he thought of the deer and became a deer. Fortunately, he learned some lessons. Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes, about a form of tapa for devotees, austerity for devotees, is regret and repentance. Sincere regret for mistakes and not properly exercising free will in ways that makes life difficult. It's a form of purification for a Vaishnava. So now, after the body of a life of a deer, it's life number 3, he becomes the son of a Brahmana. And as the son of a Brahmana, he deliberately did everything backwards. I mean, he understood what his father was trying to train, but every time his father said, do this, he'd do that, and he'd smile. And try as he may, he was a very patient father, but his son was deliberately not understanding. I think I know some people like that. They deliberately don't understand. So he was purposely behaving like that. He was afraid and cautious of the association of his non-devotee relatives. He always thought of Lord Krishna's lotus feet. And within himself, he always chanted Krishna's glories. To many, he seemed like a madman. Dull, dumb, deaf. So they gave him the name Jada, or dull, Bharata. Here, now we can see a little bit better. He's walking through a marketplace without any clothes, and people are taunting him and so forth and so on. And here's some other people taunting him and so forth and so on. His father failed in various attempts to educate Jad Bharat. Eventually, he died, his father. Jad Bharat was mistreated by his stepbrothers. Those are the stepbrothers on the right side. They, engaged him in manual labor and, treated him roughly and spoke to him roughly, and they didn't care. And Jad Bharat didn't respond, in retaliation or anything like that. He was totally aloof. Some dacoits arrested him. This was a problem for the dacoits. And they wanted to sacrifice him, a human sacrifice to Kali. Now, there's no such thing, by the way. It was their invention, but they had, imagination. So they wanted to prepare his body and then chop his head. And when they got to that stage, the deity, that you can see nicely in the back, there's a deity of the goddess Kali, and she jumped out of the deity. The deity burst open. She took her choppers and chopped them and drank their blood. Here's another painting. She's doing the same thing. So she protected Jad Bharat because she couldn't stand to see a devotee of the Supreme Lord being tormented like this and tempted to be killed. Shukadeva Goswami speaks about this to Maharaj Parikshit. He addresses him as Vishnu Datta. Vishnu Datta means one who's protected by Vishnu. Those who already know that the soul is separate from the body, like Jad Bharat, were liberated from the invincible knot in the heart, Jad Bharat, were always engaged in welfare activities for living entities. He's going to do some really nice welfare for a king. And never contemplate harming anyone. Those persons are always protected by the Supreme Lord. This is Shukadeva's lesson to Maharaj Parikshit, who is like Maharaj Parikshit. He'll be protected. He carries his disc, Sudarshan Chakra, and acts as supreme time to kill the demon to protect his devotees. The devotees always take shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord. Therefore, at all times, even if threatened by decapitation, they remain unagitated. For them, this is not at all wonderful. Now here's a question. Prahlad was protected. Jad Bharat was protected. Why wasn't Parikshit protected? Jiva Goswami says some people ask this, and here's the answer. He was exhibiting by the Lord's arrangement another opulence of a devotee, that even in facing death, his mind was fixed and totally undisturbed. And because of that, he went straight back to Godhead. So he was showing another protection of the Lord. In fact, the whole pastime of Maharaj Parikshit being cursed to die was a fast-tracking him to the spiritual world. 7 days, going back to Godhead. So in his third birth, this is looking back on chapter 9. Remember, we're going up to 15. Gosh. In his third birth as Jad Bharat, he acts as if he were dull. His brothers put him out in the fields like a scarecrow to watch the grains. There, he is captured by dacoits, and when they raise a sword to sacrifice him to the goddess Kali, she bursts out of the deity and beheads them, for she is unable to tolerate their offense to a devotee. That's down there in the lower left. Goddess Kali chopping the dacoits. So now comes a real nice section with more details. This is the palanquin carrier Jad Bharat, chapter 10. So he enlightens the emperor. There you see, they're all dressed very nicely, but Jad Bharat is not dressed so nicely. The other palanquin carriers needed a fourth carrier. They found Jad Bharat, he looked strong, he's kind of a simple guy, so they enlisted him. And that was a mistake, because he was a self-realized soul and he wouldn't step on ants. So as they were carrying the palanquin, I think you can see that the light is less bright, so now you can see those little ants. So he was unable to step on ants. So he was more concerned about the ants than the king. So when he was stepping over the ants, the palanquin was getting jostled. And so the king leaned over the palanquin and, shouted at him, "You better watch what you're doing." Covered by the mode of passion, angry due to the innate nature as a king, he spoke sarcastically. "You must be fatigued from carrying the palanquin alone for so long and for so far. You must be old and unhealthy without strong limbs." He's young and quite healthy. "Are your fellow carriers not cooperating with you?" He's being sarcastic. Jad Bharat just heard, like all the other situations where he was taunted and didn't respond. His spiritual power was covered like fire, covered by ashes. He was literally, not only externally, but internally unaffected. He had no bodily conception of I and mine. He resumed carrying the palanquin. But it happened again. He wasn't going to step on ants. Shukadev Goswami comments, when King Rahugana chastised the exalted devotee Jad Bharat with harsh words, that peaceful, saintly person tolerated it all and replied properly. Actually, he was just silent. Like an ordinary man, he thought that by carrying the palanquin, he was destroying the reactions of his past misdeeds. Thinking this way, he began to carry the palanquin as before. Again, Rahugana spoke angrily when Jad Bharat carried the palanquin unevenly. Are you dead? Despite life within your body. So Jad Bharat is going to respond to each of these statements. And we're going to hear them. It's nice. Are you dead? Despite life within your body, don't you know that I am your master? You are mad. For this disobedience I shall punish you, so that you will come to your senses. Then Jad Bharat speaks. And it's the first time he's spoken. We don't know of any other time he spoke, because otherwise he was not speaking to anybody about anything. My dear king and hero, whatever you have spoken sarcastically is certainly true. Actually, these are not simply words of chastisement, for the body is the carrier. The load carried by the body does not belong to me, for I am the spirit soul. There is no contradiction in your statements, because I am different from the body. I am not the carrier of the palanquin. The body is the carrier. Certainly, as you have hinted, I have not labored carrying the palanquin, for I am detached from the body. And I'm neither fat nor skinny. You're stout, he used that word. You have said that I am not stout and strong. And these words are befitting a person who does not know the distinction between the body and the soul. The body may be fat or thin, but a learned man would not say such things, or would say such things of the spirit soul. I am neither fat nor skinny. Therefore, you are correct when you say that I'm not very stout. My dear king, you have unnecessarily accused me of being dead, though alive. In this regard, I can only say that this is the case everywhere, because everything material has its beginning and end. My dear king, you have said, you rascal, you dull, crazy fellow, I'm going to chastise you, then you will come to your senses. In this regard, let me say this, that although I live like a dull, deaf, and dumb man, I'm actually a self-realized person. What will you gain by punishing me? If your calculation is true, and I'm a madman, then your punishment will be like beating a dead horse. There'll be no effect. When a madman is punished, he's not cured of his madness. So I'm just going to skip this because of time. Hearing, there's more detail. Rahugana was astonished to hear such profound words from and apparently a simpleton. Realizing that he was in the presence of a great soul and giving up his pride of being a king, he immediately fell flat at Bharata's. He got down from the palanquin, fell at his feet, begged forgiveness, and asked, "Who are you?" Are you a learned Brahmana, wandering in disguise? You move about covered and unknown to others. That's the king at the feet of Jad Bharat. I'm not afraid of Indra's thunderbolt, Shiva's trident, or Yamaraja's punishment, fire, sun, moon, wind, or weapons. But I am afraid of offending a Brahmana. Please express your teachings again. I was not able to understand everything. It's not exactly how he spoke, but I wasn't able to grasp. You spoke in such high terms. Can you say it in a simpler way so that I can understand? So, give me Bhagavatam class number 2. With submission. So, that was chapter 11. I'm not going to go through it. One has to neglect the mind and conquer it with the weapon of service, the lotus feet of Guru and Krishna. That's in part of his teachings. Chapter 12, Rahugana asks specific questions aside from, can you say it again? Jadbharata establishes the falsity of the material world in his second time around. One cannot realize the absolute truth by sacrifices, renunciation, Vedic study, austerities, and so on. Same message we hear again and again. They're insufficient. It is possible only by smearing one's body with the dust of the lotus feet of great devotees. By detachment from matter and attachment to devotees, one gains the sword of knowledge by which one can cut illusion. By hearing and speaking about Krishna, one revives one's dormant Krishna consciousness and attains the Lord. That's chapter 12. In this chapter, Jad goes on telling who he was 2 lifetimes ago. You're a king, I used to be a king. Previously, there was a king named Bharata, detached from all material activities, both seen and heard. I was fully engaged in the Lord's service, but I was thwarted in my goal due to affection for a deer. Thus I became a deer in the next life. Due to my past service to Lord Krishna, I could remember my past life, even in the deer body. Fearing material association, I wandered about unnoticed. Now, look at the image at the top. That's what's coming up, the last chapter. Almost the last chapter. That's the forest of material delusion, material life. He really gets into it. Jadbharata compares the living entity to material situation to a merchant entering a forest to acquire goods to sell. Seeking shelter within the forest, the merchant befriends cranes and vultures, only to be cheated by them. Thus Jadbharata advises the king to slash the hard knot of the illusory energy with the sword of knowledge. Now, we're not going into the detail. It's detailed, really detailed. It's very similar to what we're discussing in the morning class, the knowledge and detachment lesson of Krishna to Uddhava, in Uddhava Gita. But it's really, he's really intense. He doesn't, he takes the gloves off and lets him have it. Detachment. Because he wants, for some reason, we don't know the reason, why he didn't speak to anybody before Rahugana, except he must have seen something in Rahugana, like there's a little light in there. And so he spoke. And when he saw the king was eager to hear more, he gave more, and gave more, and gave more. So it's very powerful teachings. Just like when Krishna is speaking to Uddhava, he makes reference to another Avaduta by the name Dattatreya, and here it's Rahugana, another Avaduta, but he has full understanding of what's going on. It's not that the qualified Avadutas don't know what's going on, they're just dull. They know what's going on, and they're so averse to material life that they just live in this world of pure consciousness and detached like anything from material affairs. And if such a person, in the Uddhava Gita, it's Dattatreya speaking to King Yadu. And here is Dattatreya speaking, it's Jadbharata speaking to Rahugana. Qualified. That's why he's speaking. And he goes in. So here's King Rahugana and his response. Quickly. This birth as a human being is best of all. Even birth among the demigods and the heavenly planets is not as glorious as birth as a human being on earth. What is the use of the exalted position of a demigod in the heavenly planets? Due to profuse material comforts, there's no possibility of associating with devotees. It is not at all wonderful that simply by being covered by the dust of your lotus feet, one immediately attains the platform of pure devotional service to Adhokshaja, which is available even to great demigods, which is not available to even great demigods like Brahma. By associating with you just for a moment, whoops, what happened? Just for a moment, I am now freed from all argument, false prestige, and lack of discrimination, which are the roots of entanglement in the material world. Now I am free from all of these problems. That was pretty quick. May we all be so fortunate. May we meet Jad Bharat and become freed from illusion. Ki Jai. Otherwise it's, steady sadhana and gradual purification. So there's just 2 chapters left and just 2 slides left. There's lots of little guys landing on our arms and stuff. So we'll try to end quickly. Shukadeva Goswami explains the whole allegory he made of the merchant going into the forest to get goods, and Shukadeva retells it in his own way. A merchant entering the forest to acquire goods is like the greedy, conditioned soul entering this world and chasing the objects of the senses. Like a deer chasing mirages in the desert, the conditioned soul pursues material existence despite disturbances in his life and considers this world to be permanent. The whole chapter full of that. And the last chapter, 15, Shukadeva Goswami further describes the dynasty of Bharat in the line of the dynasty of Priyavrata, which was in the line of the dynasty of going way back, Swayambhuva Manu. After several lineages, the famous saint King Gaya ruled the earth. He was called Mahapurusha because he possessed complete transcendental knowledge. All the chaste and honest daughters of Maharaj Daksha bathed Maharaj Gaya with sanctified water. He was able to derive all benefits from the earth and thus satisfy the desires of his citizens. 15 chapters, not bad. And now you can see the screen too. So I don't know how we're going to do this during the Festival of the Holy Name. It's planned to be in a tent. I don't know how it's going to work. After the sunset, it'll be great. During the daytime, we'll have kirtan. Class in the morning, class in the evening, kirtan all day long. Or things that don't require a screen. Then maybe that's what we'll do. And some bug spray too. Well, I don't know if this fits in with what you had planned for this evening. No problem, huh? No problem. Okay. Got the word. Something that I forgot to do is when we have classes, I don't know if we're going to have time for discussion. We'll take some time. But there's usually some questions that I don't have the answers to, and that's how I'll research it. So I've got 2 of those. One of those was Anga's son was Vena, and Vena was wicked. And the explanation of why he was wicked was that his mother's father was death personified. Now, who's going to marry death personified anyways? And marry death personified's daughter? Prabhupada explains it was, the astrologers goofed up. Normally they don't, but in this case they did, and because of they goofed up, it wasn't a good result. So I hope you two had good astrologers. And that your father is not death personified. So the explanation that it is. So how did this come about? This is from Canto 4. So very early in Canto 4, there's a description of the story of Dhruva. And just before the story of Dhruva, the very beginning of that chapter, there's a little short 3 verses description of the causes of destruction or devastation. Because the stepmother of Dhruva was the victim of those causes of devastation. She brought about her own devastation, and she brought a feeling of devastation in Dhruva because of forces of devastation. That's the preamble to the Dhruva story. But the word is in chapter 8. The word that's used is 2 things: adharma and falsity, or asatyam. So one of the foremost of principles of goodness is truthfulness. Bhaktisiddhanta writes about that, rather going into detail. And adharma has some offspring, and one of those offspring of adharma, the byproducts of adharma, is death. It's right there in Canto 4, chapter 8. And death, having been mentioned in chapter 8, is mentioned again later in the 4th canto, that death, it was a offspring or byproduct of adharma. And somehow the astrologers goofed up. And as a result, the queen, that Anga, who was an ideal person, got married to somebody who was the daughter of death personified. And so their son was of a wicked character. So that's the little explanation. It took a while to find that one. It comes in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on the verse that says, Vena, now Anga's wife was the daughter of death personified. He uses the word mrityu. And then that's the explanation from this chapter 8 verse. Then another question that came up was, in the case of Dhruva, why was it that she had committed an elephant offense when it's not clear yet that Dhruva is even a devotee? Because elephant offense is defending, he's a little kid, you don't go offending little kids. But why is it Vaishnava aparad? And the answer, I had, when that question came up, I wasn't remembering. But here's the answer. Dhruva was the grandson of Swayambhuva Manu. And Swayambhuva Manu, for sure, taught his grandson all about bhakti. So he had received the seed of bhakti, and he was a bhakta Dhruva. He wasn't matured yet, but he already had a life of devotion within him. And already he was seeing the 2 queens, his mother and stepmother, with equal vision. He had qualities like a Vaishnava. And when she spoke the way she spoke because she was envious, she wanted her son to be the king, not Dhruva. She was so harsh. And that was the offense. And it had grave consequences for her. So Niti was forgiving, but Suruchi had to die in a harsh way and had lose her son in a harsh way because of her offense to a Vaishnava. So once again, offense is it's a real deal. It's a real serious thing. And one must be very careful not to offend. It's certainly offending devotees and other things that one should not offend, but don't offend devotees. It doesn't work just avoid devotees, then you don't have to offend them. We need sadhu sangha, but we need to not offend sadhus in the name and the deity and the scripture and the process of bhakti. Don't consider it a material thing, a karma kanda thing. But it's in another category. We need to understand spiritual things as spiritual things and conduct ourselves accordingly and carefully guard against offense. Okay. This has been one of the longest classes of any of these evenings, and I don't know how it happened. But here we are. And you want to resume kirtan, or do we have some time for discussion? It's late. An hour and a half. Anybody would like to raise some discussion topic? Still, okay. We have a little microphone for some remote people.
Is it okay and is it less harmful to, cause an offense to non-devotee? Why does the God discriminate between devotee and non-devotee in the
Okay, that's a
punishment?
nice question. And then how about this one? Is it okay, or is it less serious to offend a small devotee as opposed to a big devotee? Well, it's best to not offend anyone, even a mosquito, or these little guys that are jumping on us and stuff like that. But there is gradation, and there's greater culpability. There's intention that's behind the gradations of living entities. But yes, there is a difference. It's not okay, but there is a difference. Is that all right with you? You're not feeling good about it. You're discriminating against the non-devotees. Okay. It's not we are. Here's Krishna's words. You familiar with Bhagavad Gita a little bit? Samaham sarvabhuteshu. You know the verse? Name dvesho stina priya, dvesha and priya. I don't have dvesha towards anyone or priya towards anyone. Sarvabhuteshu, all living entities I see equal. Sama aham. Sarvabhuteshu. I see all living entities equal. Neither dvesha nor priya towards anyone. That's the first half. Then he says, for the devotee, they're very dear to me. And the reason they're dear to him is because he's dear to them. And it's natural. No, it's spiritual. It's spiritual affection. It's not a material attachment. Put that in your transcendental brain and process it. There's a distinction between spiritual affection and material attachment. Spiritual affection is on the spiritual plane. Material attachment is on the material plane. And they're not the same. Say, is it okay to have spiritual attachment for the holy name, or spiritual attachment for Bhagavad Gita? What's the big deal? There's Harry Potter and there's Bhagavad Gita. They're both books. Or Alice in Wonderland, or whatever it is. Moby Dick, and there's Bhagavad Gita. They should see them the same, right? You can have respect for every living entity. To take living entities, they're spirit souls. But the respect especially goes to those living entities that hold the Supreme Lord very dear. Now it doesn't, so you get the idea. There's plants, and then there's Tulsi. And we have special regard for Tulsi because Tulsi has special devotion for Krishna. So we have special regard for Tulsi. Although the plant doesn't mean, okay, you're insignificant, you're not a Tulsi. There's gradations. And it's, there's spiritual affection that's different than, material attachment. You're kind of okay, but not completely okay. And I don't know what to do about that. You got that thing on your forehead like... Ah. I'll say the same thing a different way. For those who are, there's the beginning, intermediate, and top stage of bhakti. In the intermediate stage, Madhyama Bhakta, that's recommended, they worship the Supreme Lord, they associate with devotees, they give kindness to those who are innocent, and they avoid those who are atheists and vilifiers. And amongst the devotees, you serve those that are superior, you make friendship with those who are peers, and you extend kindness to those who are newer and beginning, less advanced. So you make distinctions, and the relationships are different. Then those that are innocent, you extend. And those that are vilifying type people, you keep a distance from them. It's not disrespect, you just keep a distance from them. Because, they can hurt themselves, they can hurt your devotional creeper. Unless you're, a super devotee, and then you can, like Narada Muni, you can go right in the midst of those people and give them Krishna Bhakti, in an intelligent way. But there's distinctions in grades of living entities. Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. You spoke about the Lord's protection when Jad Bharat was protected in the Kali sacrifice.
Yeah.
So, how come Krishna did not protect him in his early life itself when he was attached to the deer, and he was protecting his body in the later life?
Aha. Nice question. Well, Jiva Goswami, I said, he explains, he made a choice. And Krishna doesn't interfere with living entities' choices, even if they're dumb ones. His choice was, I'm going to stop my devotional practice. In the deer situation. When he was in the situation of the Kali sacrifice, his mind was fixed on the personality of Godhead. So he was protected by his agent, Kali. Okay? So as yayatamam prapadyante. Yeah. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, I like the point which you said, Bhakti is being blocked by Anartha, and Anartha dissolves Bhakti. So, when Bhakti is being blocked, how does Bhakti dissolves Anarthas?
By anartha nivritti. By sustained bhakti. What that is, you endure the fact that there's clouds in the sky that are blocking the sun, and you carry on your devotional practices with the prayer and the hope and the faith that by sustained devotional practice, the anarthas will become dissolved. We're in Krishna's hands. We can't get rid of those anarthas on our own. We're in Krishna's hands. The clouds dissipate, in other words, by the strength of anarthas dissipate by the strength of bhakti in time, but not quickly. Anarthas are more dangerous than sin. Offense is more dangerous than sin. Okay? I think we should end. Do we have something online? A lot or little? How about this? I'm not sure what to do because it's late. We'll take two. And then make note and we'll do it tomorrow.
Questions are from Shrida Das Prabhu.
That's Singapore.
The rope of affection seems to be very subtle, that a living entity is cheated without even being known. As we can see from the story of Bharat Maharaj, that because of the affection for the deer, he fell down from his devotional service. And I also see something similar in the story of Dhruva Maharaj, that because of his affection for Uttama, he gave in to anger.
It's different. Go ahead.
So the question is, apart from understanding that it's a lesson for conditioned souls like us, that Lord orchestrates these acts, on the other side it also seems that for pure devotees who have even realized Vishnu as the ultimate goal, there's always a chance of fall down due to these ropes of affection. So my question is,
It's not ropes of affection. That I'm interrupting because that wasn't the cause. The cause was his anartha from his previous life. That's Jiva Goswami's conclusion. It wasn't the affection. It was excessive, but that even the excessive affection wasn't the cause. With the anarthas from his previous life. And we carry them with us into the next life too. It's just like sin carries over to your next life. So, the premise of the question needs some editing. He can go back to the drawing board and re-edit his question. Next.
so the question is, when interacting with family members and relatives and friends or devotees in my daily life, how to make sure that the affection I'm showing is material or spiritual?
Well, you do the litmus test. Who's at the center? And generally speaking, it's a mix. It's not either one or the other. But, I and Krishna. It's a mix. So that's the litmus test. Spiritual it's just Krishna. And, a really nice example is Queen Kunti. He can read Kunti's prayers and get the picture of a no mixed position. She how elevated is Kunti? She's way up there. And she's asking Krishna to relieve her of the mix.
The second question from the same devotee. Is it possible that when Krishna reciprocates, that a living entity cannot understand the reciprocation? How does the devotee move towards the position of understanding that something happened in his life, whatever is happening is the reciprocation of the Lord?
Well, that's, how do we become Krishna conscious? And I'm dedicating myself to responding to these questions by saying, Sadhu Sangha. and unpack it, and that's how. Because of time, I'm not going to unpack it.
This is from Rupa Vilas Prabhu. Oh, sorry. His question is, India is Bharat Maharaj and Jada Bharat both appeared in Satya Yuga,
Yes,
and is India named after this Bharat Maharaj?
yes.
And then now Padmaja Mataji's question.
No. Tomorrow. Thank you all very much. You're very patient, probably hungry, and probably want more kirtan. And the bugs stopped. They were kind of zooming around, and now they're... Is that the pattern? You don't know. They were trying to hint, like, hurry up, guys. Okay.